Welcome, Astral Visionary Ones. The Master's greatest trick was persuading everyone that they weren't even playing the game. The selected ones do more than merely survive the game. They change the rules, stack the deck, and make their opponents believe they are still in control. Here's the cold, harsh reality. While everyone else was stretching their hands, certain they had the winning cards, you were silently removing the table. Did you realize that nearly 75% of winning poker hands never reach a showdown? Winners do not depend on spectacular cards. They depend on reading the room and playing against their opponents. And that's precisely what you did. You didn't just play your cards correctly. You made them believe they were the ones bargaining. They're now rushing to find out how they lost a game they felt they had under control. It's extremely hilarious. They thought they had you figured out, loyal, predictable, and always looking for their approval. But when you turned the script, it wasn't only their ego that suffered. It represented their whole belief system. They now feel cheated, and ironically, they handed themselves a losing hand. So buckle up. This is not your typical story of underdog success. It's a narrative of precise tactics and how the selected ones didn't just win. They made their rivals doubt the game's core idea. First and foremost, the power transition was always impending, but you hastened it. The power transfer was never going to occur suddenly. It was inevitable, but you didn't just wait for it to happen. You got everything done quicker and on your own terms. What hurts the other party the most is that they had no idea what was coming. Despite the fact that all of the signals were there, you did not make a fortunate move. You engineered a sequence of events that, to outsiders, seemed to be destiny in action. It was premeditated, purposeful, and superb. They believed they were untouchable. Sitting comfortably at the top, they were certain that their grasp on the game was unbreakable. They misjudged how quickly things may change when the right person at the right moment takes the correct action. That individual was you. You did not declare your goals or make great announcements. You just observed, researched, and placed yourself where you needed to be. And then you tipped the scales. What bothers them the most is that they didn't just lose. They feel deceived by their own hubris. They believe that they had more time. I believed you were just another participant in their game. They were unaware that you were not waiting for permission to take the reins. You were already holding them. And now, as they try to make sense of everything, they can't figure out what went wrong. The truth, it did not go wrong. It went just as expected. They just didn't see it. You did not cheat. You did not hurry. If anything, you only accelerated what was already set to happen. And now that the change has occurred, they're left in the dust, wondering how they missed the warning signals as you drove miles ahead, unconcerned by their uncertainty. Number 2, you were not just playing cards. You created the deck. You did not just play the cards you were given. You created the deck while they believed everyone was following the same rules. You worked silently behind the scenes, altering the game in ways they never anticipated. They expected you'd respond to the hand you were dealt. But the reality is that each step you took was purposeful. Each choice is part of a larger picture. They could not see. They were so focused on their own tactics that they never questioned the game's core. And there's where you kept them. You were more than simply another gamer at the table. You were the architect of the game, selecting how and when it will play out. They followed the rules, but you rewrote them, relying on chance and instinct. You were calculating the results and expecting their every move. They have been caught off guard. They felt they had a chance. They thought they had control. However, it was part of the illusion you built. You made them assume they had the upper hand to keep them preoccupied. The more certain they were, the more they played into your hands. It was too late for them to recognize they had been outmaneuvered. This was not about cheating or dishonesty. It was about mastery. You didn't breach any rules. You knew them better than anybody else and utilized them to your advantage. The deck was not rigged. It was expertly constructed for someone with the ability and patience to utilize it. Right. That person was you. They now feel cheated, not because you fooled them, but because they had no idea they weren't in control to begin with. You did not merely defeat them. You made them wonder whether they ever had a legitimate chance. Number 3, vengeance was never your objective, but rather a side result. Revenge was never the intention. For you, this was not about settling scores or making a point. It was about advancement. The actions you took, the choices that changed everything, were not motivated by malice. They were strategic, pragmatic, and essential. But now, as they wallow in the ruins of their own mistakes, they can't help but feel it personally. That is not your issue. It is theirs. The fact is that they linked their identity to the power they believed they had over you. They based their confidence on the expectation that you would always remain in your lane, obey their rules, and play their game. When you ultimately outgrew all of that, it was more than simply a change in the game. It threatened their feeling of supremacy. And this is why they feel deceived. It is not due to anything you did. It's because your progress forced them to face their own limitations. You never meant to harm them. You just understood that you did not need their permission, processes, or validation to succeed. You walked outside. You left them behind. It wasn't vengeance. It was evolution. They mistake your self-respect for antagonism. But in truth, their rage has nothing to do with you. Their own doubts are shouting at them, telling them that they will never be as strong as they believe. They now sit with their emotions, calling it treachery. We call it vengeance. Let them. It doesn't alter the reality that you've advanced to greater and better things. While they're stuck reliving a game that no longer matters to you, it was never personal. It was all business for them. It was a reckoning they were never ready for. Number 4, the illusion of allegiance. You never promised indefinitely. Loyalty is a tough concept. For some, it is a true friendship based on mutual understanding and respect. However, for others, it is a leash, a weapon for keeping individuals in place and controlling them under the illusion of commitment. You never believe in that type of loyalty. You never promised to remain forever, never agreed to be someone else's pawn. If they feel deceived now, it's because they mistakenly assumed your presence was permanent. That is on them, not you. The issue is that individuals believe loyalty implies remaining the same no matter how much the world changes around them. They want you to remain in the same position, to continue playing the part that helps them, even if it no longer benefits you. But the selected ones understand better. You realize that loyalty does not imply mindless obedience. It is about being loyal to your principles, even if it means leaving individuals who no longer share them. You never broke a promise because you never made one you didn't mean to keep. When it counted the most, your commitment was genuine. But when the dynamics changed and the game no longer benefited you, you moved away. That was not betrayal. It was about growth. If they're upset, it's because they think their proximity to you ensures their safety. They believe they could count on your allegiance without earning it. They now brand you disloyal. But what they truly mean is that they're wounded. You prioritized yourself above others. Allow them to understand that loyalty does not include sacrificing your own progress for someone else's comfort, which you have never committed to provide indefinitely. Even if they suspected you did, it doesn't mean you were wrong to leave. Their error was believing that proximity was sufficient to keep you tied. They forgot you were never supposed to be bound down. Number 5, which they term manipulation, was just a tactic for the unprepared. Any action that they don't comprehend seems manipulative. They observe the result. They feel the agony of their own defeats and promptly call foul. But the reality is more simpler than that. You did not manipulate anybody. You just planned better, while they relied on assumptions and chance. You were analyzing every option, evaluating every step, and carrying out with precision. What they term manipulation is merely a failure to appreciate the art of strategy. It is not your fault that they didn't see the larger picture. They believed the game was simple, that everyone played the same manner and at the same level. But you were not interested in the surface movements. You saw the patterns, gaps, and blind spots. They had no idea what they had. They were busy underestimating you. You used their overconfidence against them. Each action you performed was purposeful. Every choice. They couldn't even begin to see how it fit into a larger scheme. And now, in their fury, they've labeled you the villain. Why? Because blaming you is simpler than admitting their own stupidity. It's simpler to call your method manipulative than to acknowledge they didn't consider 3 steps ahead. However, calling it manipulation does not alter what occurred. The gameplay was fair. They simply weren't prepared. You did not lie, cheat, or mislead. You just grasped the rules better and used them to your advantage. If they feel deceived, it's because they never imagined losing to someone who played better, not harder. Strategy is not manipulation. It is mastery. And if they don't see the change, it's their issue, not yours. The result was not due to chance or deceit. It was the product of planning, meetings, and opportunities which they will have to learn the hard way. Number 6, they played to be loved. You played to win. They were consumed with being liked, gaining applause, and winning over the audience. For them, it was all about making the loudest movements, attracting the most attention, and relishing in fleeting approval. But you saw through it. You recognized that popularity passes, but respect endures. They tired themselves while playing for cheers. You were focused on a larger aim, winning. Their hunger for approval became a weakness. Every action they took was intended to please someone else and get brief recognition. They sought the limelight, but they were unaware that it came with conditions. The audience's approval is fickle. It moves as readily as the breeze. They based their approach on preserving that acceptance, unaware that their need to be liked was subtly undermining their goals. Meanwhile, you were playing a completely other game. You were not hoping for applause. You were creating something that would endure. Every choice you made was deliberate and based on strength rather than the desire for validation. You recognized that respect is gained via outcomes, not theatrics. While they squandered their energy attempting to win over everyone, you remained focused. Finally, it was not even a competition. Now that the dust has settled, they are faced with the harsh truth that their popularity was insufficient. It became the same thing that held them back, like a noose tightening with each step they made to appease the throng. And you're standing tall, unconcerned with the sounds they formerly considered important. There's so much. They played for applause. You played for legacy. That is why they lost, and why you will always succeed. Number 7, the regulations were fair. They simply weren't prepared. There was no cheating, no deception, no underhanded actions. Simply pure preparedness. The regulations were always fair and established from the outset, and everyone had the same opportunity to achieve. The trouble was that they didn't bother to prepare in the same manner you did. They believed they could depend on instinct, chance, or the same stale techniques that had previously proven effective. But you knew the stakes were too great to leave anything to chance. They feel cheated because they never took you seriously. They regarded you as just another player in the game. Assumed you'd meet their expectations. They underestimated your capabilities, assuming their expertise and supposed supremacy would always enough to keep them ahead. However, you were not playing the same game. You researched it, planned every conceivable move, and honed your strategy. They were busy celebrating their previous triumphs, but now they are confused, upset, and furious. They anticipated to win because they believed they had the advantage, and they failed to understand that they were not the only ones planning for success. They did not prepare for you. They were unprepared for the challenges of dealing with someone who was more strategic, focused, and ready to go the additional mile. Ignorance is not an excuse when the stakes are so high. They might call it treachery or unjust, but the truth is this. They lost because they didn't value the game enough to realize that preparation is key. They felt played since they were never prepared to begin with. You didn't breach any rules. You just followed them more effectively than they could. Number 8, you researched them. They never researched you. You were always a step ahead, not because you went quicker, but because you noticed things others did not. While they strutted about, caught up in their own sense of superiority, you were discreetly examining them, analyzing their every action, noting their flaws, and comprehending their blind spots. They felt they had the cards, but you'd already examined their hand. They didn't see you coming because they were too busy staring in the mirror, sure of their own invincibility. You weren't simply playing the game. You were seeing things from a vantage point that they could never achieve. Every choice they made, every error they missed, was something you saved for later. You didn't respond as quickly as they did. You listened. You were watching. And you learned. The more they disclosed about themselves, the more you knew how to counteract them. They were too caught up in their own egos to see they were being examined. It was too late by the time they realized what had happened. They'd already played into your hands. Every action they made, every blunder they did, was part of a broader scheme you had discreetly implemented. And when the time came, you didn't have to make a huge deal about it. You just moved, and the results were obvious. They never researched you because they didn't think they needed to. They assumed that their arrogance was sufficient to secure their power. But you weren't simply a player for them. You were the epitome of perfection. And while they were too preoccupied with their own reflection, you were silently winning. They are now left wondering how they could have lost to someone they believed was beneath them. Number 9, your patience was a weapon, not a virtue. Patience is not always a virtue. It is a weapon, and you used it with brutal accuracy. Every time spent waiting was neither idle or inactive. It was a premeditated pause, an opportunity to watch, evaluate, and prepare. They pushed forward, overconfident and impetuous. You remained still, polishing your plan, and waited for the optimal opportunity to attack. They misunderstood your forbearance for reluctance. However, each second you spent holding back was another second you used to sharpen your blades. Complacency proved their undoing. They were so concentrated on moving and acting that they never took the time to consider the wider picture. They hoped their momentum would carry them through, but they didn't know this was a high-stakes game. Timing is everything. While they became accustomed, their sword dulled with each hasty choice and blunder. They did not pause to review, change, or wait for the appropriate time. And here's where they failed. But you didn't just wait for nothing. You realized that time was not on their side. It was on yours. You were constantly planning and analyzing your next move, analyzing their vulnerabilities and coming closer to the point when you can strike with surgical accuracy. When the moment came, your blow was precise and forceful, slicing through their arrogance like a hot knife through butter. They will never realize what you've done to them. It felt like sorcery or a stroke of luck. But the fact is that it was not chance. It was all about patience. They didn't expect such a silent weapon. Number 10, they never saw you as a danger. Their worst error, the greatest error they made, was not to underestimate you. It absolutely dismissed you. They viewed you as nothing more than a minor impediment, someone easily disregarded, too minor to pose a danger. They believed their position was so safe, their authority so complete, that you didn't deserve their attention. And that's precisely where they went wrong. Dismissiveness is an opponent's ultimate vulnerability, since it blinds them to possible threats that are right in front of them. They underestimated you not because they didn't perceive your worth, but because they were too preoccupied with their own ego to see it. They didn't notice you. Dismissed as unimportant. The hubris played directly into your hands. You made them assume they were untouchable, knowing full well that their overconfidence would cloud their judgment. They couldn't see someone like you being a significant danger, so they let their guard down, making themselves exposed. The true brilliance was how you let them live in that fantasy. They felt safe, comfortable, and confident in their assumptions. They remained focused on larger objectives, believing they could handle whatever you threw at them. But you didn't have to toss anything. Your silence, your patience, your measured movements were enough to bring them down. The instant they disregarded you, they sealed their doom. Now, as they see you ascend, they will have to confront the harsh reality. Their greatest error was not underestimating your abilities. It was thinking that you were unworthy of consideration in the first place. You weren't a danger to them since you were so little. You posed a danger because you were the one they never expected. Number 11. Your quiet was the ultimate tactic. Your quiet was not weakness. It was a strategy. Others raced to speak so they could be noticed. You remained silent and observed. When utilized appropriately, silence is a powerful tool that few people understand. You allowed them to display their hand. Every insecurity, preconception, and blind spot. They chatted, flaunted, and persuaded themselves that they were untouchable. Meanwhile, you were absorbing everything, sharpening your comprehension, and waiting for the perfect opportunity to strike. Silence is beautiful because it is often overlooked. They misunderstood your calm for inactivity, inexperience, or maybe even fear. They had no idea that every second you remained quiet, you gained greater power. The less you talked, the more they revealed themselves. The less you responded, the more reckless they were. You didn't ignore the game. You were learning how to win without having to yell about it. When the moment came, your stillness transformed into accuracy. You did not squander words or energy. You just acted. The effect was obvious. They didn't see it coming because they were so focused on being loud and dominating the discourse. Your quiet had lulled them into a false feeling of security, and by the time they understood you were never really out of the game, it had already ended. They now feel deceived. But what were they expecting? Silence does not indicate absence. It denotes observation. You saw everything while they were too preoccupied with their own words to notice you. At the finish, your quiet was not only a plan, it was your edge, your advantage, that transformed their confidence into their biggest vulnerability. And now they will think twice before underestimating the power of silence again. Number 12. You did not play the game. You rendered the game irrelevant. The final triumph wasn't merely defeating them. It was in rendering their whole game ineffective. They were fixated with adhering to the same old rules and procedures that had previously served them well. You were silently demolishing those structures and creating something new. They used all of their energy fighting to save what they believed was a successful plan. However, by the time they recognized what was occurring, the game had already altered. And you? You were prospering in the new environment, leaving them wondering how they had been so outrun. They played the game because they believed it was the only one that was important. They felt that success was achieved by understanding the old principles and using the same strategies that had previously proven effective. However, you did not just learn how to win inside those confines. You recognized the barriers for what they were, limitations. So, rather of attempting to fit into the mold, you shattered it. You spotted the flaws in the system. They depended on and took actions that transformed everything. When the dust cleared, their game no longer mattered. You had already established a new one in which their previous tactics were useless. By the time they caught up, it was no longer about playing. It was about adjusting, and they arrived too late at the meal. Their despair, their desperate efforts to cling to what they felt was control, were hopeless. You weren't following their rules, and weren't attempting to win their way. You rendered the whole system irrelevant. And in doing so, you became the one who determined the rules of the game, allowing others to find out where they belonged in this new universe you had already dominated. In the end, they failed to see that the game was never about who moved the quickest or shouted loudest. It came down to who knew the game better, played smarter, and had the patience to outlast everyone else. You didn't have to follow the rules since you were constantly one step ahead and making your own. Their belief in their own superiority was their biggest vulnerability, which you exploited without breaking a sweat. They labeled you cold, calculating, and manipulative. But the reality is, you were just ready. You were not motivated by ego, but by the realization that true power does not come from pleasing others, seeking plaudits, or fitting into a game that does not benefit you. It stems from understanding when to act and when to wait, from seeing your own potential before anybody else does, and from realizing that sometimes the greatest way to win is to render the old rules obsolete entirely. They're left with a bitter taste of loss. They couldn't understand how they could have lost to someone they believed was beneath them. But the fact is that they never had control. You aim for something larger, something deeper. You'll be far ahead while they rush to rescue their damaged dignity, already prospering in a world they don't grasp. The game did not end when they believed it did. It ended the minute you decided the game no longer mattered. And now you're the one defining the terms. If you've liked this voyage of strategy, perseverance, and outwitting the odds, don't miss out on more insights that will keep you ahead of the competition. Make sure to subscribe and join our community as we go deep into the art of winning, perfecting every move, and breaking free from the restrictions of outdated systems. Don't let the game pass you by. Stay tuned. Maintain a keen focus and remain ahead. Subscribe today, and let's change the rules together. God bless you.